Good morning. Happy Saturday. Thank you for clicking on this video and joining us today. My guest is Charlie, but you may know him better as Darth Carnivore. I think he's in every single chat every week. I think he's always wherever I'm at, so it's pretty awesome. But let's go ahead and bring him over. He's got a pretty awesome story to tell. So let me go ahead and bring him over if I can find my mouse here. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Dustin.
How are you doing, buddy?
Doing all right for Saturday morning. May the 4th
Saturday
be with you, right? So.
Yeah. Saturday morning.
Yeah.
I miss doing this. I think I went like a week or two without doing these, and it kind of bums me out. I just didn't have
we've been trying to figure this out for a while, so it's finally good to be able to do this together, and no less than a thematic Saturday for May the 4th being a Star Wars themed day and everything. So
and then tomorrow we've got Return of the Fifth, and then
exactly.
Yeah, so I was looking forward to having you on here. I've heard bits and pieces of your story. We've been on road trips together, driven hours and hours together in cars, and you've kind of went over a good amount of your story with me, but I want to share it with anybody who may not already know. So if you want to kind of go ahead and start, because I know you've done this twice.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big part of my story is this is sort of round 2 and hopefully the last round of that journey. So the first time I did it was back in, I don't know, like 2010, around that area. So before my first, introduction to low carb and keto, I had tried to do Weight Watchers, right? So had a Weight Watchers group at work. So it's like I got cut out there. So I had tried to do Weight Watchers like a few times. I think I had lost 30 pounds my first time, and then maybe 15 pounds another time. But I was always fighting hunger for the most part. So I didn't have the language to describe what I was feeling. I just assumed it was just a me problem and not something everyone else goes through. But whenever you eat, so at the time, Weight Watchers was very, low fat, high carb, essentially. I don't know what it is like now, but back then, you have this points calculator when you read the nutrition label, and it pretty much encourages you to eat, a very high carb diet while we're trying to restrict calories. So I would have my whole wheat pasta, my 99% lean ground beef, my low fat pasta sauce. And I would feel good for about 5 minutes after eating that. And then I would just like fall asleep. So I was having to fall asleep in the middle of dinner. And then, I would get tired. I would get hungry. I would, want the dessert afterwards so I can, feel good again. And then my energy levels would just come crashing right back down the following hour. And then, that was kind of like my day. It was this, what they call a blood sugar roller coaster. It starts with one bad decision followed by multiple bad decisions throughout the day until you basically go to bed. So I stumbled across this paleo website called Mark's Daily Apple by Mark Sisson. I don't know if you have heard of that name before, but he wrote the book, The Primal Blueprint. I didn't necessarily subscribe to everything, but I subscribed to like most of the things. I liked his idea that looking at a paleo sort of lifestyle to see like, okay, maybe, we didn't have these problems of diabetes and, getting fat in those eras. What could we learn from the past that could apply to the present? So one of the things I really liked about, Mark Sisson at the time was that he was just a very good explainer of things. So now I had language to describe exactly what I was feeling, when, I had those 2 attempts at weight loss through Weight Watchers. So that really got me into the low carb space. And then I read a couple of other books because, back in 2009, 2010, there wasn't a lot of YouTube channels like there is right now. So I had to go to a lot of websites and books for the most part. And so I read, was it Protein Power Life Plan by Dr. Mike Eades. So he was, kind of a contemporary of Dr. Atkins in this low carb weight loss space. And then, a couple of other books like the Art and Science of Low Carb Performance and Living, by Doctors Finney and Volek. And so that really helped me out so that I was able to apply that to great success. So I don't know, so I'll kind of sum this up. Is it all right if I try to present something?
Sure.
Just a video. Let's see. Let's see. Hold on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like Dr. Finney and Dr. Volek, but Dr. Volek, I've listened to him talk a few times, and he is very dry.
Yeah.
Where Finney's more of, Finney's more like a person you can relate to, and Finney's like total scientist and, in the lab type guy,
Right. 2 monitors. Okay, here we go. Sorry, it took me a while. Can you see what I'm presenting? So after, the Weight Watchers attempts, I kind of slowly gained weight up to 350 pounds at my heaviest. So on the left was me in, 2009, 2010, around there, I think, at 350 pounds. And then on the right, I got down to about 200 pounds. So I lost 150 pounds in about a year or so, maybe a little over a year. Body fat percentage went down from like 50% down to like 10 or 11% on the right. I was going from wearing, 3X t-shirts on the left down to small on, like 50-inch waisted pants down to 30 on the right. So, so I feel like I had figured something out there. What I was also doing was I was working out a lot, playing a lot of racquetball, doing a lot of weightlifting. It was a little bit easier at the time too, because I didn't have, a kid. My wife was working full time and going to law school at night for a number of years. So I was really kind of a bachelor, essentially kind of a bachelor for a little bit. So it was really easy to, find time to work 3 or 4 hours while working, a full-time job at the time. I think my only duty was just to make sure the dog got in and out. Okay, walk the dog every once in a while. So, but what I was also doing was I was having, I know you and I have had this discussion about whether to call it or not, but it was very deliberate. It was planned where, I would do intermittent fasting. I would do a low carb, high protein type of diet, work out a lot. And then I would have kind of like an off meal plan, an off meal, so to speak. So I would just kind of gorge with, whatever I wanted. Usually it was going out to eat. That was kind of my way of dealing with, feeling deprived and whatnot. So, after I had lost 150 pounds, I maintained it for a little over a year. And, it was pretty good from there. And then slowly life started changing. So the wife got done with law school. So I was having to, spend a little bit more time at home and with her, had a kid. I couldn't work out nearly as much. I didn't really change my approach. I still had that, one cheat meal a week, and then I would fast the next day and then, get back into it. I would test my blood ketone Precision Extra. I think they still sell these things, but that was the only brand that they had then, so I would have this slow weight gain from, let's say, 2013 through really about 2018. So it crept up quite a bit. And then or really like 2020, I guess. And then, 2020, that thing happened, COVID, where, we were both working at home full time. It was kind of an adjustment period. Everything was closed down, including, the gym. So it became really easy to overindulge in hyper addictive foods. So my wife and I kind of sabotaged each other in that way, because when I was doing low carb keto the first time, back in the early 2010s, my wife did it with me. So she was doing it with me, and she lost, 60 pounds in 60 months, her weight. And then, my decisions kind of enabled bad decisions with her, and vice versa. As I'm sure as a married man, that sometimes you can sabotage one another's health
Oh,
goals.
100%. We do it all the time. I mean, we do try to mitigate the damage by it, like, instead of going to like the grocery store and buying something, we will try to maybe go out to eat, and that way, like, because at least, one thing that you were talking about is, your cheat meal would be, a going out to eat meal, which is, I think it's a smart way to do it. If you're going to, like, if you've set your mind to it, that's a smart way to do it, just for the fact that then when you get home, you don't have that anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
because chances are, I mean, even if you're bringing them leftovers, it's probably not much. So I think that's a good way to look at it. Just like when we do like family dinners or something and the kids cook something, we send whatever is not for us home with them. So it's not in the refrigerator going, "Hey," or like, we went back, we did that video a couple of weeks ago where we had $100 gift card from Chalk
Mhm.
Zero, and we ordered $100 worth of stuff from Chalk Zero, and then we went back and ordered some more stuff. So I mean, it is kind of a self-sabotage, but at least that way it's Chalk Zero and not Hershey's, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so, but under 100% having that is a twofold, because she's also there for me when I have like something triggers in my life and I'm like, I'm just going to go do this. And she goes, that's not the best idea. And you'll feel bad tomorrow if you do that. So
Yeah.
it's two sides of the coin, right?
Now, I agree with that, because, I had a kind of a slow weight gain, from, let's say, 2013 through 2020, essentially. I mean, it crept up. So, I was back into like 2X t-shirts and stuff. So, I mean, still better than I was, but nowhere near, at the peak, essentially. But when COVID hit, it became a lot easier to indulge at home. So that's when you can really indulge in these hyper processed, hyper palatable foods. And that's when I gained, like, that's when I surpassed my 350, at heaviest weight in February of 2022. I was at least 410 pounds. And the only way I knew that was because, I would periodically visit the doctor, and then you would have to weigh yourself. So that was the only time, as I knew I was gaining weight, that I weighed at least that much. And I really didn't start my journey, back into keto until June. So, from February to June, I had thought about it for a while, about, what I could do. And then, you go to family gatherings, your parents are like, "Hey, did you know you're getting big again? I'm really concerned about your weight." And I'm like, "Oh, of course, I know I'm getting bigger." Some of the ways I, obviously knew I was getting bigger, you look in the mirror, you're buying 5X t-shirts, you're buying 54-inch waisted pants, and you have to get it through delivery, because you can't go into like a normal store and buy those things. I think right before COVID happened, I was on a business trip. I had bought a seatbelt extender and actually had to use it, because, I didn't want to suffer from embarrassment having to ask the airline stewardess, "Hey, could I have a seatbelt extender?" While everybody's getting boarded to the plane. So right before COVID happened, early or late 2019, early 2020, on there, I still have that seat extender, just haven't gotten rid of it. And, between February and June of 2022, I had bought a sock assist or a sock aid. So it's like a little device where you kind of put your sock under it, and it's got like two little handles, and because I was so inflexible, so out of weight, it would wind me. I'd be sweating and, short of breath, just putting on my socks.
Like trying to tie your shoes and
trying to bend down, tie your shoes and stuff. So, those are, realities I was trying to learn how to cope with. And then, you got to think, if you wake up and you're already winded and sweating, just trying to put on your socks, let alone your shoes, how much harder the rest of that day is. I had, low energy at the time. And, as a parent of a young one that, starting to move around and stuff, it became harder just to go through life. Right. So going through this low energy state, packing on, you're having at least 410 pounds of weight to carry around. So it also impacted a lot of decisions. So, as I was eating bad, my wife was eating bad, so she was, so I kind of, I do blame myself for, her causing weight. And then, if she's, for bringing home, bad food into the house, then, the, food decisions for the kid probably aren't optimal either. So it was this spillover effect that I was having, not just, on myself. So, as a parent, it's rarely kind of like a victimless crime to eat bad. Sometimes it spills over into others, in your household. So, at that point, when I woke up and, I'm like, just never again. So between February and June, I was thinking about this. I'm like, we're a full 10 years later after doing it the first, but without that cheat meal, because when I was reflecting, I would always look forward to that cheat meal. And, I would, kind of enjoy the things that were on plan. I would appreciate what it did for me, but I never really appreciated the act of eating it and preparing it, myself. It was just kind of a check the box thing until I can get to my meal. I would always feel really bad about the off-plan meal, cheat meal, whatever you want to call it. Definitely wasn't keto or, paleo, is, going out to eat. I would, do like a 48-hour fast and then work really hard in the gym. So I was spending a large part of the week trying to get back into ketosis, and really guilt would kind of fuel my workouts, so it was kind of soured the experience of the gym, and, the rest of the meals I would have, it cast a long shadow. So I said, well, let's, not do a cheat meal this time. And so in June of 2022, I started doing what I would term a strict keto. Now, fast forward from keto or low carb on, from the early 2010s to early 2020s, it's a lot different because, I remember back then, ricing your cauliflower. So I would have to buy a big head of cauliflower. I'd have to get like the ricing side of the grater, and rice my own, thing. So there's a lot more convenience now. So I think they even had riced broccoli. So I would have rice, broccoli, eggs, hot dogs, bacon, that kind of stuff. So, very low carb, keto friendly. There's a lot more convenience, but then there's also a lot more keto treats that I would get in trouble with. So I did kind of a 20 net carbs type of approach. And what I was doing was, where I was in June of 2022 was, I was still eating like a lot of or right before then, I was still eating a lot of the, the burgers and the fries and stuff. So my thought was, what if I tried to ketofy a lot of the things I was eating at the time? So it's just, a smarter substitution, kind of a way to ketofy the junk food I was eating, because at 410 pounds, I was losing weight pretty effortlessly. The low carb tortillas, the low carb bread, in that context, it made a lot of difference. So within and so I was doing pretty good. And, in June we had gone on a family vacation. So I knew that, if I could stick to it during a family vacation, then it's almost 2 weeks just staying on plan. Um, you know, Before June of 2022, I got the official diagnosis of type 2 diabetes from the doctor. My A1C was, 6.8, recommended weight loss, and, recommended, maybe I go on some weight loss injectable drugs. So I thought about it. I didn't go on it at first. I wanted to kind of explore it more. But after 2 weeks going back on keto, I lost the initial water weight, and after 2 weeks, I'm already kind of into new territory. So I said, okay, doc, go ahead and prescribe me those weight loss injectable drugs. So I stayed on it for about 2-3 months on the lowest doses, just because I was into new territory at the time. Because more than 2 weeks on plan, I've never been there before, so I was worried that those cravings would come back. It never really did. The only thing I noticed from those weight loss injectable drugs was that, if I ate a lot of meat, I would have to run to the bathroom, let's say. So I thought, well, that's a weird side effect. I didn't notice any other difference. I was eating OMAD one meal a day, throughout that time. I was still staying within the confines of dirty keto. So, um, like a pint of Rebel ice cream and Quest candy wasn't off plan, as long as I was still under 20 net carbs, subtracting out the sugar, alcohols, and the fiber. So, I did that. And I was like, okay, after 2-3 months of staying on plan, not really cheating in the sense that, I was going out to eat like a whole pizza, or, a big meal at Culver's or something. I asked my doc, I think I can go without it. I've gained enough confidence staying consistently on plan that I can go off the weight loss injectable. So after 3 months at the lower doses, I quit. I stopped. He deprescribed that medication for me. Then I continued losing weight. I think within the first 6 months, so from June. That was actually June to November. So 5 months, I had lost 70, 75 pounds at that point. So I was kind of doing this dirty version of keto, um, ketofying my junk foods essentially, and kind of staying in that plan. So Becky asked the question of, if I snacked or not. It was still one meal a day at that point. So usually it was something between lunch and dinner is kind of when I would eat my one big meal. Um, so yeah. So, oh, sorry,
And
that
she's
question was for
asking
you.
yeah, she's asking that, like, also addressing like a weight loss stall. And I think one
Oh,
of the
okay.
main things that I see people when they talk about a stall is they will look at something that's maybe a week, maybe they don't lose weight for 4 days, or the scale doesn't go down. But I want to say, and I may be off just a little bit, but I think a stall isn't anything under 6 weeks,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, the timeline.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. People might define stalls differently. So for me, um, it the first several months, the first 5-6 months, the weight came off pretty effortlessly. Like it would consistently come off every week, and it would kind of stall. So if you looked at, as I was looking at my weight, it would kind of stair step down after a certain point, meaning that it would stay something for 3-4 weeks or 5 or 6 weeks at a time, and then just drop like 5 pounds all of a sudden. So yeah, so 6 months, 5-6 months on pretty strict but dirty keto. So I wasn't having any cheat meals. I wasn't going out to eat. I wasn't bringing home bad foods. or anything like that, but still staying within the bounds of dirty keto. So, but in the context of 410 plus pounds, I think it worked pretty well in that context. The other like non-scale victories I was having was I was having a lot more energy. So and shoes without the socket device, starting to go down in size from like a 5X to a 4X. So, that was pretty motivating, in addition to the weight loss. The lab numbers, the blood lab numbers were looking. So there's another question of like what my meals looked like back then. So I was on keto. Like I said, sometimes like dessert would look like a pint of Rebel ice cream, because some of those are, it could be like 4 to 8 net carbs depending on the flavor. And then like the Quest candies, like their peanut butter,
they're like 4 to 5 net carbs.
cups. You could have like so many,
bars,
and it'd only be to stay under 20. I would use like the low carb keto breads to make myself grilled cheese and sandwiches. Bacon and eggs, of course, ground beef, burgers. At Kroger, they had these cloud breads that you could buy frozen. All you had to do was just kind of thaw it. So I would use that. So, I mean, not
I actually
super
have in my freezer, I have 2 cloud bread. So they look like chaffle breakfast sandwiches, like they're cloud bread, but they're like chaffle shaped.
Yeah.
I'm going to be reviewing those sometime soon. But yeah, it popped in my brain that they're in my freezer. I can't like forget about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I would kind of make some low carb cheesecakes, but I don't know. Usually when I make like some of these fancy dessert recipes, I would kind of go crazy and make them 2-3 times a week instead of just once a week. So I would kind of stop doing that a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of what I was eating. So I never really encountered what I would think of as a stall, where it's like 6 or 8 weeks where nothing's changing. And I kind of did that pretty consistently. So where am I now? And I'm November 2022. I decided to join the gym for the first time. So now because I have all this increased energy from the previous 5-6 months of doing strict but dirty keto, I was getting like a lot of house. Once I was able to cover the basics at home, then I thought, okay, I have extra energy. Let's go ahead and start working out. So, so I started working out at this gym where they would take like your blood sugars and stuff. So my blood sugars would be pretty good on this version of keto that I was doing. Still continuing to lose weight and body fat percentage and stuff. So, things were pretty good. And then, but throughout this entire time, I had been kind of dabbling in the carnivore space a little bit. So, so throughout like a lot of my first time doing keto, I had heard of people that did what is now termed a carnivore diet. I don't think the carnivore term came out around the early 2010s, but people just called it like zero carb or something like that. So I had heard about it. I thought it was crazy at the time because I'm like, well, how do you go to the bathroom? How do you, do, I mean, theoretically it seemed possible, but it seemed like, I don't know, it seemed crazy back then, but fast forward like a decade later, there's, Doctors Ken Berry, Dr. Anthony Chafee, Sean Baker, and so on. So I'd been kind of dabbling in that space for a little bit while still doing keto, but I kept to my keto because the results were pretty good. I'm like, well, why change something if the results continue to show up for you? So, lab numbers. There's a question about lab numbers.
Yeah,
I think,
that up here.
Yeah,
lipid panels. So I haven't had my lipid panels run in a while because I don't have a general practitioner currently, but before, but when I was working in an office and we had it was an interesting conversation because the last job that I had, our general practitioners were in the building with us. So I
Mm.
worked for an insurance company, and in the building, there was multiple offices and such in this big building. And there was like a dentist office in the building, and you go to the basement, there was a whole doctor's office. And we would go down there and get our physicals, and they would give you HSA money for all of that stuff. And so keeping up with your panel work and knowing where you were and all that stuff it wasn't, there was a monetary incentive. And I would go, and it was interesting because year over year my numbers would get better. And then I had a conversation with the general practitioner, and she was like, well, how much red meat do you eat? And I'm like, primarily only red meat, really. I mean, that's a bulk of my diet. I've been basically keto, but leaning more towards the carnivore side of things. But I still like broccoli, and I still try things for the videos and all that stuff. And she was like, well, I need you to cut back, maybe have less red meat. And I was like, but if you're looking at my numbers and they've gotten better year over year, why would you ask me that?
Right.
And then they don't have an answer. It's like, if my biomarkers are getting better and my lipid panels are good, my cholesterol is in order. But it was one of those things though that I did find out that the manual cuff, because my blood pressure's always been high.
Mm-hmm.
And they would always say it's like white coat syndrome or whatever. But then, and I found out at that point, because she kept putting the automated cuff on me, it was like through the roof. Or like I should have been, she's like, what is going on? She gets out the manual cuff and it's perfectly normal.
Mm.
So she's like, well, so that's how I will do it forever, is a manual cuff, because it doesn't make sense to look, So it's just one of those things that I haven't had, like, to answer her question, a lipid panel in a while, but the last ones I had were trending in the right direction.
So that brings me to a good point. So, back in June of 2022, when I, first started, I was on metformin, 500 milligrams twice a day. Because of the diabetes that the doctor diagnosed me with. I was also on up to 2 different blood pressure medications because my blood pressure was really high at that point at 410 plus pounds. So I was still taking this throughout the first several months of, going back onto more of a consistent keto. And so but I was also kind of dabbling in the carnivore space a little bit, but the keto results were pretty good. So I just kind of kept doing keto, just kind of, if things are working out well for you, you continue staying the course until you do get to a stall and maybe you rethink some variables to, self-experiment with later on. So,
yes, I think with stalls, I think one of the best things to do would be to further simplify simplify what you're doing. Because I think a lot of times, especially you touched on this when you first started doing the keto again, you were trying to ketofy all the stuff that you were eating prior. And we did the same thing. As we started in 2016, and when that was one of the big things, is you go and you find all your recipes, how to make corn dogs and all these things. Because if I'm going to live this lifestyle, then I'm not going to deprive myself. I'm going to try to mimic everything I can. And it becomes so complicated, expensive, and all of these things. So I think when you're looking at a stall, look at what you're doing, and are you doing too much? And I don't mean, are you eating too much? I mean, are there too many variables involved in what you're eating? Can you simplify that? Like if you're making these huge elaborate meals, can you scale it back and just go like burger patties, eggs, maybe some broccoli, depending on if you're keto, ketovore, carnivore, whatever. How can you streamline things and kind of reduce the amount of variables to see what may be causing the stall? So, I think that's probably the best, not advice, that I can give.
Right. So, this entire time I had never, I enjoyed some of the carnivore content because I had never really questioned vegetables, right? So, some vegetables might be not as good because it spikes your blood sugar higher than others. So, outside of that, I had never really questioned vegetables. And, as a 1980s kid, I hated vegetables just because, that was the advice that most parents at the time followed is like, you better eat your broccoli, your steamed vegetables, and you're not getting that from the dinner table until you finish your vegetables. That kind of.
Nobody knew about sulforaphane or anything like that, so they didn't even think about, because it was always the healthiest way to do it is to steam the broccoli, steam the Brussels, or boil Brussels sprouts or whatever it was. Thankfully, I never had to necessarily go through that. My mom didn't make us eat vegetables, and when she did, she would make canned carrots, and she'd add sugar to it. So I mean, bless her heart, she was trying to do the best with the knowledge that we had, because and then shortly thereafter, here come the snack wells, and here come my grandma being like, you can have all the rice-a-roni you want because it's low fat.
Yeah, the whole snack well phenomenon, right? So.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's akin to the keto snacks coming in too. You know what I mean? I mean, they're a higher calorie, but they're high fat, but there's a lot of loaded fiber. I mean, there's a lot of inconsistencies with those as well, and a lot of misleading claims with all of those snacks and everything. And you have to kind of like, with anything that we deal with in this community, or whether it's Weight Watchers, because I had friends that I worked with that were doing Weight Watchers. One had done it so much that she didn't even have to pay anymore. Like, she was like exempt from paying anymore. Like, you get to a certain level and it becomes free somehow. I don't know. But then I had a friend that she would do, she would play with her points every day, so she could still go home and have a sleeve of like Girl Scout cookies. And I mean, and in theory, you're like, okay, I understand. So I'm diligent in my tracking, and I can do this and do that, and then I can go and have this cookie as a treat, and it all fits. It's like, the same thing with keto, if it fits my macros, because that was a thing as well. And and then you see that kind of thing progressing, and then they ended up going off the rails and stuff. So I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels. So I mean, it's like what you were talking about, the initial look at like carnivore, and you're like, how could people eat that much meat? How could that be healthy? We thought the same thing in the early days of like Atkins, because we would be hanging out at Denny's all the time as youths, and we would see these people come in ordering the steaks and be like, they're doing Atkins, and then there would be weird whisperings that they were taking medications to keep their cholesterol in order so they could eat that way, and I was like, that seems that's so weird. And there's like so many misconceptions over the years. I mean, so many dietary blunders that we've lived through in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Even watching like my great grandmother, like take her cottage cheese and rinse away the whey and eat the curds. Or she'd have like low calorie bread, which was just really thin sliced bread. It's just such a strange phenomenon that we're living through right now, where we are kind of seeing kind of that, that was it Atkins book, The New Diet Revolution. I think that might be paraphrasing what it's called or whatever. But I think we're kind of seeing that, where we're looking back and going, why did we do this? How can we learn from this? And how can we move forward in a smarter, more educated way that encompasses enough people to make a true difference? Whether it's keto, carnivore, because carnivore is not going to work for everybody. Keto may not work for everybody. Dirty keto, whatever keeps you basically from being in a standard American diet state.
Yeah.
So anyway, so back to where you were in your timeline. I'm sorry to derail that.
So yeah, still kind of doing this dirty version of keto. I was, consuming a lot of diet sodas. So like Diet Mountain Dew was kind of like my thing throughout this entire time. I was doing some like those Mio drinks that add caffeine to your water and stuff. So that was some of my drinks. I would kind of make my own versions of like keto pizzas. So they had like like low carb pizza crust that you can order through like Thin Slim, I think was some. So I would make that every once in a while. So it's basically eating the same things that got me to 410 pounds, but they're a much more ketofied version, and I was losing weight that way. So, and so not much change other than making some of the smart stuff, better substitutions. And I was losing weight, at 410 plus pounds, got down quite a bit that was like the easiest thing ever. And another big weakness of mine was, whenever I go to like movie theaters, I always want to indulge in like the popcorn, the big tub of popcorn. So I would kind of make my own version of popcorn. I think they had like a kernel. So I popped my own popcorn. They had like this high fiber kernel or whatever. And I would use the flavacol and the coconut oil and ghee as the butter topping once you melt that. So, even when I was watching movies at home, I didn't feel deprived at all. I could still kind of indulge in all the junky stuff I've been doing, but I had found better substitutions for it in a more ketofied way. So, everything's going good until the summer of 2023 or late summer of 2023. I was taking like a standard urinalysis test, and they found like dried blood in there, and they couldn't figure it out, and I just let it go. And then I remember September of 2023, I was having these weird pains in my lower back. It turned out to be like a suspected kidney stone. Suspected just because we never actually found kidney stone, but they'd given me medications to kind of widen the hole a little bit and help shrink down the kidneys, the suspected kidney stone. So I never had anything in there. I had to get scoped at that end because they were like, oh, okay, can't explain, haven't seen the kidney stone, but it couldn't explain, the couple of urinalysis that had, dried blood in there. So I had to get it scoped just to make sure there wasn't anything funny going there or cancer. So we got it scoped and everything's good to go. I've never had a recurrence since, but the last thing I was drinking before that really painful night of that suspected kidney stone, I was drinking Diet Mountain Dew. And I just remember thinking throughout the whole thing, man, if I make it out of this, I'm never drinking, a diet soda again. So after September of 2023, I cut out all diet sodas, Diet Coke, Diet Mountain Dew were my go-tos then. And I found that it really helped reduce my craving for sweet things. I didn't cut it out completely, but that was a pretty big way to turn that painful episode into something beneficial, was just cutting out the diet sodas at that point. And then before January of 2024, I'm trying to think where I am in the timeline here. So yeah, about January 20, maybe it was 2024. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was, no, 2024 would have been just a couple of months ago. So hold on. So this was, September of 2022 is when that suspected kidney stone incident happened. And then between September 22 through January 23, I listened to some of these YouTube channels where everybody's saying, get your fasting insulin checked, essentially, because, everything looked fine. The way I was doing keto, I was testing, positively for ketones. So I would be, like 0.4, 0.6, 0.7, something like that pretty consistently. It's kind of a higher protein, I guess, at the time. And my blood sugars would be like 80s or 90s. So everything was, looking good as far as what I could measure through the ketone meter. So I like to measure the ketones just because, the scale is kind of a lagging indicator. You don't know if you're on the right track, day in, day out. So the ketone measures, at least every other day was, pretty good, positive reinforcement that I was on the right track. So I finally got my fasting insulin checked by my doctor after explaining to him, like, well, these doctors on YouTube said go get it checked, and he didn't really have any objections to it. And it turned out it was like 15.6, which was shockingly high, I guess. So at that point, I started looking more into the carnivore diet from January of 23 till about June of 23. And then I kind of made the switch to carnivore, after watching a lot of Dr. Berry videos, Dr. Anthony Chafee, and so I made the switch. So I cut out, using the keto breads and the keto pastas and tortillas and all that stuff. Cut out. I didn't cut out the cheese. So I was still kind of doing carnivore with cheese, a carnivore version with the cheese on there. And then I was starting to get my insulin down. So it went from like 15.6 in January of 23 to, let's see, in June, it was like 8.6 or something. And then
do we know what it's supposed to be, like what normal is? Because getting it checked is still relatively new. And I don't think a lot of people even understand like where, I have never had mine checked, to be honest, because I don't even know if the GPs that I had before would even have known how to even, I know you can do like own your labs now and get it checked, but because I know I've heard a couple of different things where it's like you can get it checked, but if you checked it 20 times a day, it would be different each time. So
I didn't check it 20 times a day just because I can, fasting or insulin at all, at home. We kind of use, I think that glucose and, your ketones, I thought it was giving me an approximation of what my insulin was doing, but I was incorrect according to my lab results. So that's kind of eye-opening in terms of the quote unquote normal range is anywhere from 2 to 25. So, it didn't flag me as high or anything, but, a lot of doctors I was listening to at the time, they said, at least 10 or below. Optimal, it might be like between 2 and 5 or 2 and 6, depending on who you listen to. So, but at 15.6, it wasn't getting anywhere close to that. I think Dr. Berry talked about it. Dr. Paul Saladino talked about it. So I think I had bought Dr. Paul Saladino's book, The Carnivore Code. And I think this was might have been sometime before or around when he switched to, eating fruit and honey into his diet. So, but it was a very good book. I thought it was a good, foundation, but that was one of the things I was exploring, still doing keto essentially. But so that switch from keto to carnivore, after looking at the fasting insulin and, but when I got my June lab results back, so I had been visiting my doctor every 3 weeks or every 3 months to get, lab results and just kind of an accountability mechanism that way. So I finally got my fasting insulin down to, I think it was either 2 or 3 or something. So you just in a few months, making those, changes, got my fasting insulin down to 2 or 3. My A1C went down to 5.5. So I was no longer even pre-diabetic. So, he started deprescribing metformin and, tapering off the blood pressure medications. So I was taking my blood pressure at home, keeping the log of that because I do get a little case of white coat hypertension, or just the act of going into the doctor's office, sitting down real quick and taking it, it does elevate it slightly. So we kind of compare that against my home logs that I take, and he's like, yeah, you're good. So tested normal in the doctor's office, tested normal at at home when I tested. So he helped deprescribe me off my paper off, and now I'm completely off all the blood pressure medicines. My doctor keeps asking me what am I doing and stuff like that. He's, whenever I do meet with him, he's taking notes. Like he had never heard of, a lot of these carnivore doctors. I think one time I gave him my copy of Women's World magazine because it had Dr. Anthony Chading on there. It's like, well, this is like one of the doctors I follow, and it gives a good article outline of kind of my approach now on this carnivore diet. But even on my version of carnivore, I would eventually cut out cheese at one point. There wasn't really any compelling reason for it, but just to see, could I do it, right?
Have you reintroduced? You haven't reintroduced cheese yet, have you?
I had a slice of cheese like the other day, or 2 slices of cheese, and a lot of that decision making was I had family over. I had made a bunch of brisket patty burgers, and I put some with cheese on it, and no one was eating the other two. So I was like, I can't really throw that away. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and eat it. And I think I found out that I can have cheese every once in a while. It's not something that I'm like addicted to. It doesn't harm me or anything, but I was surprised to find that I didn't really miss it as much. When, in thinking about it, without cheese, what I really liked was the texture it gives when it's melted onto something, right? Because I don't normally just
Oh
eat
yeah.
sliced cheese
Texture's huge.
just to eat it. So, so what I found as a substitute was, just take the grease from the burger or whatever you're frying up, put it back on top. So I think if at one of our local carnivore or keto meetups, I ordered just a plain 8-ounce burger at this restaurant we were at, and I asked them, instead of throwing that grease away, put it back on top before you serve it to me, because I don't like dry
Oh
meat
yeah.
at all. I don't
Yeah.
like it dry. It's got to have some kind of liquid texture on that. But grease is an excellent texture on that. And then salt. So I've always had kind of a salty tooth. So it wasn't ever like the cheesecakes or the candies that would get me the first time I was doing carnivore, but it was always the starchy stuff like the pizza, the pasta, the breads. That was always my biggest weakness there. And a lot of the times, like why you have like why you have those is just so you can soak the grease and put it in your mouth, the meat in your mouth. So it's kind of at least my way of thinking about it. It's just a way to not get your hands greasy, so you can eat a greasy burger.
And one thing I did want to talk about is something you mentioned a couple of times that we've hung out. Like, so you have gone and increased your calorie intake up to what, like 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day? Am I close on that?
Yeah, so I thought I was suspecting a stall at some point, and I was just kind of like, okay, I'm eating 1,700, 1,800 calories. In very low level of ketosis. So I just thought, well, what if I just increased my calories? Because I was like, well, it clearly was my weight clearly wasn't going down anywhere by lowering or keeping my calories consistent. So I kept it up. But the other thing I was doing was also changing my fat to protein ratio. So I was trying to synthesize a lot of pieces of advice together. So there's a lot of that champion the idea you should average about a gram per pound of lean body mass per week, per day or something like that. So there's like a protein target. But then I've heard that some people, if they can hit their at least 80% fat ratio to protein on low carb approach, that changes things. And so I try to synthesize both of those pieces of advice. So what happened was I would eat a lot, because what was happening before was I would eat a steak, but a steak is only gets you up to 65-70% fat to protein if you don't add anything to it like butter or tallow or something else to it. So so trying to synthesize both of those pieces of advice. So mass, that's 180 grams. And then I'm like, okay, I got to make up the rest in fat. So I was, what's it called? Taking a lot of beef fat trimmings from the butcher shop, chopping them up into like 2-inch cubes and air frying it, essentially to kind of get the fat ratio. And of course, if you just eat beef fat trimmings, that's a lot of calories, tracking it through chronometer. So yeah, I would eat 4,000 to 6,000, or really 5,000 to 6,000 calories per day in one meal, just eating that, and found that I would actually lose weight, either maintain or lose a little weight that way. So I thought, well, that's a really interesting insight. So the key thing there is, when you suspect there's a weight loss stall, is to try to get curious, because you've not look at it as like a personal moral failure, or, don't get down in the dumps too much. I mean, there's always a little bit of that, but try to think about different variables you can change. So, like, to your point, maybe just simplifying how you prepare food could make a difference. Instead of eating one meal a day, maybe try 2 meals a day. And a lever is also playing around with your fat to protein ratio. I'm not smart enough to know like what these percentages look like just by reading a nutrition label, so I have to use like Chronometer to help me determine that. But playing around with the fat to protein ratio could be another lever, or the total amount of calories could be another lever as well. So maybe so that was a really surprising find that I was doing. So now I'm tapering it down to like 3,000 or 4,000 calories instead of 5,000 or 6,000 calories that I was doing for like almost a solid month that way, where I was actually losing a little bit of weight. So so it's kind of interesting. So Ellie has a question there. Charlie, how's your journey so far with getting your daughter closer to the proper human diet? Any tips? I know both of your daughters are kind of picky. So I will say that I haven't been super successful in getting her to my dog carnivore diet along with me, just because I can control her thing. And so at the butchers that I go to, they sell these 1-pound tubes of what they just call pet foods. I asked them like, well, what's in your pet food thing? And they said, well, it's ground chicken frames, which are like chicken bones essentially, and it's all sorts of beef organs, so liver, kidney, heart, brain, something like that, so that they don't know what to do with. So just blend it up, ground it up into pet food. I batch cook it like on the stove, so I can just kind of give it to her meal, and she eats it all up. So my dog was underweight. Now she's like at a ideal weight, so it actually helped her gain weight. And once she eats the meat once per week, I give her back the kibble if she wants it, but she never eats the fancy expensive kibble that I got her. But she likes this this organ meat blend that I give her every morning, and then she eats once a day with that. So my daughter, going back to my daughter, my 9-year-old, she has not transitioned. She has ADHD, so she's really picky about the texture. She doesn't like certain, so she eats a lot of the normal kid stuff. I guess chicken nuggets. She likes certain brand of chicken nuggets. She likes that. She'll eat some pizza. So it's things that I don't normally take in, but I think like some of her ADHD medication, it helps curb some of that appetite, because when I was a little kid, like her age, I kind of knew that I could gorge on a lot of stuff. Remember at like Jack in the Box back in the day, they had this big Colossus burger. And when I was, my daughter's age, I could eat that whole thing and still, want dessert after that. So I've not seen any binging tendencies for her on that. My wife and I disagree about the role of vegetables and stuff. So I'll, slice up some cucumbers or give her some peas so she can eat it if she wants to. But I do try to sneak in like some hot dogs, try to get some more protein in her diet. So I think because I've been eating healthier, my wife in turn has been eating healthier, my daughter, so it's a slight spillover effect that she's getting more protein into her diet than she would normally otherwise. But it's still kind of a standard kid diet for the most part.
Now, one question I have about the ADHD, and I don't know what your opinions are, if you've even looked into it, but it would seem to think that it's kind of like a circular kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, like if we get her to eat a more proper human diet, then that would alleviate some of the ADHD issues, and then she'd be, it'd be kind of, you know what I mean? It seems, but even having a granddaughter myself, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and even with what we've tried to do since she was born is prioritize protein, fats. So making sure she's getting eggs. She likes steak. She asks for cheeseburgers, but then only eats the cheese and the bread.
Mm-hmm.
Or she likes French fries, but she won't eat the extra crispy ones. But we only do like that kind of thing like once a week. Like we do Fridays, we'll take her to get French fries and such. At least as far as on our watch, anyway, as the grandparents. So we're kind of backwards in that, where we don't feed her full of candy and send her home. We try to feed her full of meat and eggs and send her home. But she's relatively good at that. But she has texture issues. She has uh, even with clothes that she wears, things that she doesn't like. Um, so I know it's a constant struggle with a 5-year-old to get them to eat anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a losing. I mean, you try to put the best choices in front of her, and hopefully she picks something. But then sometimes you just got to give her what she'll actually put in her mouth, and actually what she'll actually consume, just to keep her going. I mean, I buy her blueberries, and she likes strawberries. It was a funny thing the other day. She asked Shander. She goes, "Do you eat these strawberries?" And Shander goes, "Well, I don't want any right now." She goes, "But Ma, you won't be fat if you eat strawberries." Woo! And Shander was like, "That's not how that works." But she's 5, so it is one of those things where getting them to eat something, but that they would, they'll feel better if they ate better, because we've been struggling with that for so long, right? It's like, even touching back on how you lost all of your weight the first time, went back and gained it all back again, and then even working to get back into it. It's like, how much better you'll feel, but it's just so hard to take that first step, those first few steps to get, because it is such a scary leap, So I mean, yeah. So just getting kids to eat it all is such a task.
Yeah, she's 9 years old now, so I can't really force her to eat anything. But what I do is just try to model what good eating behavior looks like. I think one time she asked me, I think she understands that a diet by definition is kind of restricted, meaning you can't eat anything you want. So she asked me one day, why do you do what you do? And I'm like, well, honey, do you remember? I showed her some pictures of when I was much bigger. I was struggling then. And she asked me against the backdrop of my wife was taking care of her dad in the hospital, so he had suffered like a heart issue, and then a hip issue, was in the hospital there, because he's not able to take care of himself. So I said, well, you know how mommy's can't take care of himself right now. Um, for you, when I get older, I still want to be strong and active, and a big part of your life as you get older. So I think she kind of understood. So I never really talked about my why. My why is basically my daughter. Struggling at 410 pounds, plus to be the type of father that I wanted to be, active in your life, mentally there, physically there. So I think she understood that. So it was kind of interesting that one night, my daughter asked me my why, and she is a big part of my why. So it's what propels me forward, to want to age better, to get leaner, get more muscular, get better mental clarity, that kind of stuff, so I can be physically there and also present in the moment as she gets older. I think she understood. I don't know if she'll truly understand till later, but you know um but yeah, she's a big reason why I do what I do, even though she doesn't understand it. So I don't force. I don't think you can really force
You
9-year
can't.
old,
You can't force them to do something,
but you can't really force an adult either, right? So
right?
it's
That's
just, yeah, you model the behavior as best you can, and if she ever gets curious about how to lose and maintain weight, I've got a way of eating that could present an option for her, even if she went, keto, like what I was doing earlier, it would still be better than what she's doing now because, I think Christy on her channel, her son, son was doing, kind of a keto carnivore thing. Her son has ADHD and some other comorbidities too. So, because I think my daughter has some sensory issues, but I don't think to the extent that her son does. So I do agree that, in theory, I don't think it cures it by any means, but it would alleviate some of, the symptoms, the brain will.
Because how much do we think like the sensory issues that now, one question I have is, and I know that neither one of us are probably going to be able to answer it, but more just kind of get the question kind of in the ethos, if you will, like, have humans always had sensory issues but not known and being able to pinpoint it, didn't have the the vernacular to express it? Or is this something new, a new phenomenon that we're seeing because of a lot of the pollutants, seed oils, high levels of sugar, high levels of insulin, causing a lot of anxiety issues, the sensory issues, texture issues, a lot of that? Do you think that that's something that we are seeing because of, or is it's always been there?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, but I like how you framed the question of, because when you think about like problem solving, it's like, okay, can we rewind to a time when that wasn't a problem or that particular issue
Right.
wasn't a problem? What were the things, so it's a good way of framing it. I don't know the answer, but I
Right.
do like the question. Yeah, I don't know the
It's
answer.
it's akin to the whole thing of what you hear somebody like, like, well, diabetes runs in my family. Well, eating trash runs in my family. It's kind of like, like we all eat, like I eat how my mom eats, my mom ate how her mom ate, and then we just kind of pass that down. And
Yeah.
then, well, she's diabetic, I'm diabetic. Now my kids are going to be diabetic, but like at what point do we it is kind of frustrating because it seems like such a cop out, but it's a cop out that's been sold to us almost where
Mhm.
it's, well, there's a pill for that, or there's a medication for that, or what can you give me to make whatever it is go away? What can the doctor do to make something go away, instead of, well, what am I doing that's causing this? And I know
Yeah.
that's so difficult. That's such a difficult proposition for people because people don't want to think that they are doing something. And you see the meme where it's like, a pill, like there's a line here for pills and a line here for, eating better. And there's no one in the eating better line.
Yeah.
I don't.
And progressive decline that way, if you believe that, and then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point, right? Because at the 410 pounds that I was earlier, so it's interesting to think about it. So at my best in 2012, 2013, I reached 200 pounds, maybe a little less than that, and then in the course of 8 or 9 years, I had basically more than doubled my weight gain at that point. So and at the time I was just thinking, well, I don't know, maybe it is just kind of a family curse, so to speak, because my mom has kidney failure, so she goes to dialysis multiple times a week, has been doing so for about 14, 15 years now. So I know where this leads. I continued down that path of um, where type 2 diabetes leads to, end stage renal failure among, a lot of other complications. So, um, so I didn't want to go down that way. And then back to my story, I cured of pre-diabetes and stuff. And then there was another twist to the story where, I'd gone back, I'd gone, pretty carnivore. So I was cutting out a lot of the keto treats at that point. So I had cut out a lot of the keto breads, keto tortillas, pastas, the treats, and all that stuff when I went strict carnivore in June of 2023 last year, so I'm up on my 1 year. But then the lab results would come back. My A1C jumped up to 5.8. So I'd heard from like Dr. Berry, Dr. Bickman that some carnivores, the longer they starting out or the longer they do it, their A1Cs tend to rise because their red blood cells are longer lived than normal. So it's kind of a sign of vitality if your red blood cells live longer than the average person's. And so they suggested a alternative test you can take to kind of prove this called a glycated albumin. So it's in a percentage, it's kind of like an A1C, but it tests, it's more like 3 to 4 week blood glucose control. And it's not affected by your red blood cells living longer or dying off shorter, basically. So when I got that tested, it showed that I wasn't even pre-diabetic, because the normal range, let's say 0.7 to 13.6, mine was 11.7. That's the healthy normal range. Anything above like 13.6 to 15.7 is pre-diabetes. Anything over 15.7, let's say, is type 2 diabetes, essentially. So it has a very similar scale to like an A1C, but it tests things a little bit differently. So that's been testing pretty consistently in the pre-diabetes range. So I don't know, I guess the way I'm doing carnivore, it leads to longer lived red blood cells, which artificially inflates my A1C a little bit. I mean, then I tested it again, it was like 5.7. So it went down from like 5.8 to 5.7. So it'll be interesting to see when I test again if it continues around that trend or not, and how long this stays around. Let's see. Another thing on still kind of a journey for me, because I don't know if I'm at maintenance weight or not. I don't. All for me. So I'm kind of finishing up a lion diet experiment this week. So earlier in the week, I had forgotten to replenish my eggs and bacon that I normally have every week. So I thought, well, let's turn it into a lion diet experiment. We'll try that. So, and actually, not intending to lose weight, but I lost weight. So I'm down, 175 pounds since my heaviest in February of 2022. And, was wearing like 5X t-shirts at, 410 pounds. Now I'm fitting comfortably into mediums, about 22% body fat now, from, it was probably over 50% at one point. So again, indications that it's working well. I don't know if I'll continue with lion diet or not. I don't know. I kind of like the simplicity of it all. So it's even simpler than carnivore, because I'm not having to, fry eggs or, fry bacon. It's just meat. So last night, celebrated the birthday with the wife at a nice steakhouse, and I ate 2 24-ounce porterhouse steaks, medium rare. Well, so I had like fasted before. So I did like an extended 48-hour fast. So that's something else I do now too, is like I'll do an extended fast 1 day a week. Been doing that for the last 6 weeks or so. I don't know, it kind of varies on what day I do it. It just kind of depends on the plan for the week. But so I had done like an extended 48-hour fast, and then I ate 2 24-ounce porterhouse steaks. I thought, well, let me just order one, and if I still feel hungry, I'll order a second one. So I told the waiter, I'm like, I'm done with my appetizer steak. I'm ready for my dinner steak. And proceeded to demolish all of it. So like when my wife is eating, still finishing her meal, I'm like trying to tear off. So yeah, and that's pretty much where I am right now. My carnivore journey, kind of doing a lion experiment this past week. It seems to have made me lose weight. So I feel pretty good off of that. I wasn't sure that I would experience much benefit because I don't have any real, serious health conditions at this point. Like I know a lot of people that do lion diet, they have all sorts of weird, cell or autoimmunity type issues. So that's why they do it. Like your, Michaela Peterson's, and so on. But I didn't really have any of those indications. But my body seems to have said, "Hey, I like this. Let me go ahead and drop some weight for you."
Now my question is now I understand that someone like Michaela has been doing this for some time, like 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. Same thing with like Sean Baker, but Sean will include eggs every once in a while. He'll include other normal foods every once in a while. I kind of wonder if going that strict and maintaining that strict level of like lion diet, just beef, water, salt, and then you try to go back and incorporate something like eggs or like say broccoli, for example. Say you're like, broccoli really sounds like some buttered broccoli sounds really good, and then you eat it, and then you have like this kind of a weird negative reaction. And I kind of wonder like how true of a negative reaction that is versus like just your body going, okay, well, I have to reacclimate to this again. Because it's not necessarily, I don't think that like eggs, or because I know some people may have an aversion to like egg whites, or some people, broccoli or whatever the case is, whatever's they're cutting out. I kind of wonder, it's kind of like what we see with peanut allergies. We've seen an increase in peanut allergies because more and more women, while they're pregnant, aren't consuming any peanuts because they're afraid of the peanut allergies. So it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where kids are now allergic to peanuts where they may not have been if they were introduced while they were in the womb, kind of thing. So I kind of wonder how far is too far, because I understand we're seeing so many health benefits. We're seeing so many longevity things that you're talking about, like the red blood cells living longer. If we can actually prove that that's what it's doing, because I don't know if there's been any trials or anything like that. Not because I think with that kind of thing, when we're dealing with how long red blood cells are living, it's probably something we should be looking at a little closer to know for sure, instead of just like changing the test. Because it almost seems like to me, and I understand what they're doing because it is so new, but it almost seems like, oh, my A1C is going up because I'm eating all meat. So let's just change the test we're doing. Right. So it almost, and especially from maybe an outside perspective of somebody looking, going, well, you see that red all meat diet's going to cause you to be diabetic, just like we said it would. Right. And then it seems we're moving the goalpost. So it seems, I mean, just, to make sure that we are clarifying and truly understanding what we're doing, because especially, we're a community here that we are trying to live by example, and hopefully bringing lots more people into the fold to help better themselves, help heal themselves by, where along the spectrum from dirty keto all the way to lion diet, right? So that's a big spectrum. That's a big net to cast for people. But even still, that big wide net, as we're looking from it from this side, seems so wide. From the outside, they're still looking at something that's this big. They're still looking at, well, that's all super restrictive. Then you want me to be even more restrictive? But and so we're trying to get people in, and we're trying to entice them with better lab numbers, and we're trying to show our doctors, what's going on, and we're trying to. We're really just trying to showcase that what we're doing is right.
Yeah.
And I hope that all of the people that are involved, whether it's Dr. Barry, Mark Sisson or Chafee or, Thomas DeLauer, all the people who are and aren't doctors that are involved in all of this, and even us, that we're able to hopefully see the forest for the trees. And if we can make sure that we are able to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's something I'm interested in. Is are there other tests that kind of can help corroborate the story of red blood cells living longer and stuff? So
not even just that, but that's just as one example that we're seeing with Like, because now we're getting our A1Cs down. Now we're looking at insulin, and we're trying to look at all these biomarkers. And I just want to make sure, it's like, for so long, like, cholesterol was the thing that we were judging by, and then it was A1C is what we're judging by, and then we're also seeing like blood pressure. And one thing I've also seen on the other side of the spectrum is the range of what's normal is shrinking. So where, like, pre-diabetes probably would have been 6 at one point in time, now it's 5.7. And then they're medicating diabetes down to 7, whether it's type 1 or type 2. They usually medicate to 7 because they don't want to go, is it not hypoglycemic, where your blood glucose goes too low and you don't have any ketones to offset it. But I think they're shrinking thing that they're combating by, and then, like blood pressure, they're always trying to lower and lower and redefine what normal is. And I wonder, are they doing so to promote more medication or more pharmaceutical interventions to increase profits? And so it's like, I wonder about that side of it, and I wonder about our side of it, making sure that we're all doing everything that we need to do to be healthy. Because I know that we have all the best intentions. Because everybody's doing. I hate to say that I don't think there's a lot of people in either side, whether it's pharmaceuticals or on our side, that are doing anything necessarily malicious or anything. Like, most people are trying to help, right? So I just would make sure that, like, we, I guess, I hope we were learning what we're doing, I guess, because I also want to know, like, so where would you go from here? So if you settle into the Lion diet, what would, there's not a lot next for that. It's just kind of like, then it becomes homeostasis for you, or, you probably don't even have any plans yet, but I'm just curious, what would you hypothesize would be the next steps for you?
Maybe like some gradual reintroductions of, foods I was eating on carnivore. So, I am kind of curious, like, let's say I do this Lion thing for, a whole month, and then I do reintroduce eggs, like what happens at that point? So there is kind of a question there, or, what happens if I introduce cheese more regularly than I have been doing? So, there's a lot of open questions there. And I think your point is valid. It's not like there's a lot of randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies on the Lion diet or carnivore
It's
diet.
too early.
And that's why what I really appreciate about this keto carnivore space is that you have a lot of people kind of sharing their adventures, where they're at. And so, I realize that what I'm doing may not be, it may be different than the next person's, and their starting points and, beginning points may be a lot different than mine. So it gives me a lot of, support is always nice, obviously, but to both give and receive. But then, I also get a lot of ideas on what to do or what not to do. So it's a lot of open questions in my head. I really do believe in that concept of the N equals 1. You're kind of your own experiment. It is an anecdote in a sense, but it is probably the most important anecdote is, how well it works on your body. So, so there's different things I, kind of pay attention to. Like, my cholesterol has, increased, while I was going, from keto to carnivore. My doctor didn't seem too concerned about it because, in his, I forget if I planted this idea in his head or he came up to it himself, but he said, in the context of weight loss, he has seen cholesterol transiently rise. And then once you reach a stability point for a while, then it kind of goes back to quote unquote normal again. So, there isn't like a reference range for lab results that says, okay, if you're eating a standard American, well, actually, if you are eating a standard American diet, that's what the reference range typically is. But there isn't one that says, like, okay, if you are changing your metabolism to being mostly in ketosis, versus being in a sugar burning state, essentially. So that's where, I think Dr. Sean Baker, he's doing a lot of good work in that arena. Dr. Westman is doing good work too in that arena. So there's a lot that we still don't know that we're kind of learning together, so to speak. I'm still learning myself. I'm trying to remain curious because, let's say I say that 175 is my weight loss goal, which is where I am right now. I've got to find other reasons to stay on how I'm eating and stuff. So, one of the biggest non-scale victories I have is just I don't have a craving for any of those foods that got me, to 410 pounds or, 350 pounds before. So I don't crave like the pizzas. I don't crave the desserts or anything like that. So that's probably, or any sweets really. So I think that's the biggest thing. I don't really crave any of those sweet, starchy things that I used to. And I really tried to appreciate, the food that I am eating, enjoy not just the results and what it does for me, but to also enjoy the process as well. Be grateful that I don't have these sweet cravings, that I when I move, I'm not sore. I'm building on lean body mass, especially, into my 40s and stuff. So that 175 weight loss is coupled with gaining 9 pounds of lean, body mass. So I know it's going in a direction I want. Might be super, super skinny or anything. I have no desire to fit back into size 30 jeans or anything, or, small t-shirts, but just learning to appreciate the moment, learning to appreciate, by interacting with my body in this way, by feeding it these foods or not, feeding it certain things and exercising, getting sleep and all that stuff. It allows me to live life a lot easier, to be there for my daughter, my wife, my dog, right? So
Right.
it allows me to really enjoy the things that are important, right? So it's taken me a while to view food as just a fuel, fuel for your body instead of, something to entertain yourself with, or something to cope with stress, so a while to do that. I mean, I have gone to lunch outings with friends where I have not eaten something just because I know there's nothing there I want to eat. I'm really just there to interact with them. And, when people aren't chewing when I'm not chewing, I can listen to them better. I can enjoy that moment a lot better. And, eat the
I'm a
things
cheapskate too. I'm a cheapskate too. Like when
yeah.
you go out to a restaurant where, yeah, I could probably get a couple burger patties or something, but it's like that's gonna be like $20 for like a half pound of burger. That doesn't seem like a good deal to me. I mean, it's not gonna taste good enough to, so I can just sit there, maybe have a diet soda or whatever, right? Or have a glass of water or unsweet tea, depending on, whatever, what the situation is. Enjoy the time with friends, just like you would, like, when we go drive into a meetup or whatever, or, you know, it's not, I mean, it used to be such a strange, awkward thing, especially when we first started. I imagine it was the same way for you, but I've gone out to dinner. I've fasted for 21 days before. And during that 3-week period, there was a couple of times we went out to dinner. I just sat and had water.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it becomes less awkward, just becomes a thing that we do.
Yeah.
And, people who are in your life, whether they understand it or agree with it or not, hopefully they understand that you're trying to better yourself. That's really what we're here for, is to try to better ourselves and be that beacon, that light of hope for other people. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the name of the game. And, whatever diet is chosen, what ultimately matters is, does it work? Does that approach work for you? Not does it work for somebody else or, 10 other people, but does it work for you? Because you have to live your life. It is you live your life through your body, in other words. So you got to treat it accordingly, right? So, so I think the absence of cravings just because, besides my dog, I'm the only one that eats, this carnivore lion type of way of eating. And I'm able to, be immersed in this stuff, but not crave any of those things, which is, a big deal because, the first time I was doing, a low carb keto diet, I would indulge that once a week. And what I kind of figured out is that I have a lot more control over that first bite than I do the second bite of something, and then, it kind of diminishes over time. I mean, you got to think a lot of these foods, especially when you go out to eat and stuff, they've got like a team of professionals trying to find like the right bliss point so that people, love it, but don't feel satisfied of having it once in their life. They want to make sure that you come back for, multiple helpings and stuff. So you kind of they can make money essentially. So just getting out. I mean, I don't know if food addiction is a real thing, but I would think that I would think that it is because, when I was doubling my weight from like 200 to 410, I mean, you don't get there eating like whole foods. You get there eating like the hyper palatable stuff, and you keep eating it beyond the point, like even though it is disastrous to your health, you keep wanting it, right? That's kind of like a hallmark of any kind of addiction, is that you kind of know you're doing it even to your detriment.
100%.
I mean,
and I still struggle with that today. I still struggle with food addiction even now. Like,
that's almost like eating it in secret, right? So,
yeah,
which is kind of another hallmark of addictive type of behavior. So, to say that I don't know, junk food free of addiction is, yeah, exactly. As Stephanie is saying, no one gets to 400 pounds eating broccoli or steak, apparently. So if all you're eating is steak and burgers and stuff, you're not going to get to 400 pounds eating that alone. So I can attest to that. So I don't think I'm ever done with my journey. I'm always, trying to tinker around with a few things. There's a lot that we don't really know. I'm in this, I'm a guest on this book club on Sundays where we talk about, the Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. And a big thrust of that book is that, with our current dietary guidelines for, low fat, high carb, eat less, move more, that kind of stuff. I mean, that stuff hasn't really been proven either before it became policy, and it never really gotten proven after it became policy either. So,
I mean,
regardless of what diet you're on,
we still see a lot of the residuals of that. I mean, even in this chat, I mean, there's, talking about calories. Calories matter. I mean, calories are an indicator of certain things, but I don't think calories are the only metric we should be looking at. And even people who are big proponents of calories, I mean, you take someone like Lane Norton. Are you familiar with Lane Norton?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
He's big on the calories. He's like, you can eat, Pop-Tarts. And I was like, but then when you ask him, he's like, I've even said stuff to him on Twitter and such where it's like, but how are you, if calories matter, then that would assume that 1,000 calories of steak is the exact same as 1,000 calories of Pop-Tarts. It's like, that's not what I said.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are focusing solely on calories, then calories are the pinnacle. Then it doesn't matter what it is. If calories are you know what I mean? And I think we should be looking and focusing on the quality of the food. And I'm not talking about going above and beyond on what you can afford and going and buying, grass-fed I mean, if you can afford grass-fed, grass-finished beef from a butcher that's going to charge you, $13 a pound for the whole cow, and you can afford that, and that's the perfect thing for you, awesome. I can't afford that. I'm looking at Walmart prices, you know what I mean? Even, and that's like creeping up there to where, where what used to be $1.99 a pound for ground beef is now $3.46 a pound. And, that's even a struggle. Or then steak is, I was at Costco just yesterday, and ribeye at Costco was $13.49 a pound, and strip was $10.99 a pound. which is still cheaper than most places, but it's still much more than it ever used to be. And it looks like Becky has another question here. So let's see.
Yeah.
She says, how does your wife react to your way of life? I do not know how to respond to my husband and coworkers any better than telling them that it helps with my joint pain. And that's how it started.
My wife is very supportive. She's always been supportive. Like she's always been a partner in crime, and it's just she's always been very supportive, even though it's not the way that she eats. So she thinks it's very weird. She's not into a lot of the same interest in nutrition that I am right now. So but she clearly sees the results. I mean, she was commenting the other day, it's like, you've gone from looking like, Russell from the movie Up to, so I thought, she's like, you actually look younger, or you look as young as you did like the first time at your peak of doing, low carb keto the first time. And that was over 10 years ago. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, she's understanding. I mean, she lets me buy my gadgets, so I have like an indoor smoker, griddle, that kind of stuff. That have like my own little mini kitchen in the garage because she doesn't want me smoking up and splattering grease everywhere in the house. So, my wife is very supportive. I mean, sometimes like when she explains to people that, yeah, all he eats is meat and stuff, but he's, lost 175 pounds. Like I don't know. I feel at times like I'm part of a carnival act. Like, meet the amazing man that only eats meat and lives,
Right.
to tell about it. So, but when I was going through my, going back onto keto the second time and then carnivore, it's nothing I really publicized to anybody. But like when we came back into the office, going from, maximum telework, to back in the office, people knew me when I was, a lot bigger and stuff. So, they would kind of comment because, or not say anything
Human
at all.
nature.
Yeah, because they're like, oh wow, you've clearly improved. Because I think a lot of people, they're not going to say anything because at our age, you don't know if someone's losing weight just because like they may be sick with something and they're battling something privately. But I think in my case, it's not like I just got the skinnier version of myself, but I seem to have like transformed in a way, like decreasing the body fat percentage, increasing lean muscle mass and stuff, to the point where people are like, oh, what are you doing and stuff. And it's interesting, like when I react to coworkers, and like, okay, what are you doing to lose weight? Are you working out a bunch? And I was like, no, not really. I mean, I'm lucky if I can get like half an hour in the gym or a half hour time to work out, per day. So it's, that's not it, but it's, mostly my diet. Well, what does your diet consist of? It's like, well, I eat pretty much meat and eggs, and that's it. and salt liberally too. So I think that's the other trap that people fall under, is that, a lot of the low fat, high carb, eat less, move more, it's always coupled with like, and reduce your salt intake. So which, if you're transitioning to keto, carnivore, or lion, I mean, you need those electrolytes and to be able to salt your food liberally. So I think that kind of catches people in that keto flu that, don't realize, your body doesn't need to hang on to all those halts, so it just gets rid of it essentially. So you need to not just drink salts, or at least my version of carnivore is, or lion, is just salting to taste. And salt has always tasted good to me. There are occasions when I taste something, I'm like, oh, damn, that's really salty. I just stop eating it. So, but yeah, the coworkers, they'll respond, they think that they'll kind of make up a story as to how you got that way. And their story involves like, okay, you must be eating a low fat, high carb diet and working out religiously, multiple hours per day. And so they'll kind of make up a story so I don't have to ask like how I'm eating. But when they do find out what I'm eating, it's interesting. Like the first reaction is something like, oh, I could never give up cheese, or I could never give up pasta or the breads, especially.
I hear
So
that
it's
all the time. It's almost all, I couldn't give up my bread. I couldn't give up my XYZ. And it's like, wouldn't you rather give up? And I don't even see it as giving. I mean, at the beginning, yes, at the beginning, it is feel like you feel like you're giving up. Like I remember in the first few months of doing what I'm doing back in 2016 and walking through the grocery store, and I'd have to kind of like look the other way as I passed the cookie aisle because like our grocery store almost always has like the Oreos like right on like the end. So as you're walking by the cookie aisle, Oreo display is like right there, like right on the shelf. So I'd be like, I don't want to see the Oreo because I mean, how many times at the back then I would go and look at the Oreos and go, you know what? I could probably make 2 Oreos a day fit. But that's the worst worst plan for a food addict to go, I can do just 2, man. Just 2. No, it won't work.
Yeah, I mean, once I take a bite of that one Oreo, it's like that saying that one is too much and 1,000's never enough.
Yeah.
That's the saying there. So, Stephanie brought up a great point. So, I was listening to one of Dr. Anthony Chaffee's thing, and he was just kind of talking through how he thinks about like different food decisions on a daily basis. And he's like, when I wake up in this way of eating, I feel awesome. I feel like Superman. And he also looks like Superman, like for real. And he's like,
women came to like Chafee.
Yeah. So when he's, confronted with the decision of whether to eat something, that's off plan, like an Oreo or something, is like, why would I want to feel less than amazing? Because, and so I think about that, all the time as I pass through things. I have to gain an appreciation of how I feel right now. Like, I feel awesome. I feel great. I don't know. I almost have to like look at myself in the mirrors, like, you are awesome. You do feel great. You are able to, do these amazing things that you weren't able to do before. Why would you want to trade that off for anything? And the answer is, I really don't want to trade that off for anything, So I know like Coach Bronson talks about like having your why not as well. So whenever, I always think about my daughter as my why, that thing that someone that propels me in a positive direction, my wife. And my why not is, those moments when I was struggling to put on my own socks in the morning, winded and sweaty. So I always kind of think about that as well. So there's kind of both a positive, like, hey, I feel great. And I know, like I said, one is too much, 1,000's never enough. So I know where this road leads. So, I figure I'm a much better abstainer than I am a moderator. That's just something I've just learned. That's a very important concept. I'm not one of those people that can just have like one Diet Coke a week and just never think about it. If I have that Diet Coke, I'm going to want more. I'm going to always think about it. Like even, if I try to abstain from it like a day or two, it's always in my mind for some reason. I can't get it out of my headspace. So just having those cravings silenced is, I think, a huge victory. Like even if I never lose another pound, I am extremely happy with where I'm at. It allows me to be in a curious, always learning state. I asked my doctor if I could, kind of tell, some of our interactions with him. He's like, yeah, he's not really like low carb, or I don't know if he has any preference on diet and stuff. I mean, he's kind of an extremely tall, lean person himself. He's younger than me. But what he likes is that, you seem to care about your health a lot. You're actively trying to learn and better it, rather than view it as a paternal relationship where, you follow, simply whatever the doctor said because he or she holds that position of authority, that traditional authority. But, I think, when we go to our quarterly doctor visits and stuff, I mean, I think he learns a little bit from me, especially since in the medical records, he's seen that, yeah, I was at 410 pounds. He's seen all my lab results and seen it progress and improve over time. And, even the little hiccups here and there. So I think he's learning some things. I think it, helps keep me accountable. So I don't know, because I'm sure like most of the people that he sees in a day probably aren't like me in the sense of actively, consciously experimenting with their health, trying to learn more about their condition and improve upon it. But I think what he terms patient empowerment. I mean, I think that's a good, the thing is you have to care about more your health and advocate for your health a lot more than you can't just depend on other people to do that for you. You've got to do that yourself, and you got to continue down that path.
Stephanie says that Dr. Tony Hampton is her doctor.
Oh, wow.
And I know that because when I first heard about like Dr. Barry, he came on the Two Keto Dudes podcast because he had become Carl Franklin's doctor. He had become Carl's GP because it was Carl and Richard were the two keto dudes. And when they brought Ken on, he was like, like his stipulation at the time was you have to come down and see me in person once, and then we can do teleconference because it's, obviously this was 2016, I think it might have been 2017 when he came on. And so, I mean, it's also kind of impressive to see how he's grown. He doesn't even see patients anymore, I don't think. He's just doing all the stuff that he's doing. But I also kind of wonder, so right now it is kind of a revolution for those of us who are willing to take the time to figure this out for ourselves by doing this, by talking with others, paying attention to the community, watching lives with doctors and engineers and different people who are biohacking their life. But another question I have, and again, it's probably not one that we're going to be able to answer or even tackle today, but it's just one that I like to put out there. How do we effectively bottle up what we're doing to be able to put a bow on it and gift it to the masses to where it's, because if you think about what we're doing now, it's so ingrained in society, low fat, low calorie, low fat, calorie, protein. And they're, you see something as a high protein food and it's got like 8 grams of protein in it, whether it's a snack or it's it doesn't matter whether it's, plant protein or animal protein. I mean, it does matter to certain people because they only want plant protein, but we're not even, they don't even talk about bioavailability of protein. They don't talk about, all of that stuff. But how do we get to a point where somebody doesn't feel bad, or when somebody feels bad about whatever's going on in their life and they go, well, maybe I shouldn't be eating this, instead of going to the doctor going, I don't feel good here. What do you have to make it go away? How do we, how can we package what we're doing in a way that we could, like I said, tie it up in a bow, give it to the masses? Because right now we're in a situation where if you want to learn from any one of the people that we are in contact with on a normal basis, there's the YouTube videos that they put out. They have, like, some people have Mighty Networks that you can ask them individual questions, or they have paid courses, or there's paid things like, Hack Your Health, Low Carb for Better Health. There's all the different, Low Carb Orlando or whatever it is. There's Keto Palooza. There's all these things, and all those are out of pocket. Now, over the course of time, is that cheaper than going to the doctor? Yeah. But is that easily sellable to the average consumer? No. And there's not room for the average consumer. So I always just I just have been thinking about this, like, how do we package it up neatly so everybody can go, well, that makes sense. Let's do that. And I don't even know how, I don't even know if we'll even see that in our lifetime, because we're both roughly the same age. It's just things that I think about doing this. And because I know that I've been doing this for 8 years. You've been doing it for 14 years. On, I was over 400 pounds. You were over 400 pounds.
Yeah.
And we put so much of our own effort into this, reading, listening, focusing, talking, doing, interacting with people, being in chats, doing like it's almost an all-consuming thing for our lifestyles. I mean, I know we've got kids and we've got obligations and other things that we have to do, but almost I watch more YouTube than I watch other TV. Like sometimes I have to kind of like break away from it. Like I started watching Yellowstone just because I'm like, I need something to walk away from some of this sometimes. Because I mean, it kind of gets to be like, okay, I need to just walk away from it a little bit. So I just one of those things that I have a thought like, as we begin to figure this out, we also have to start figuring out how do we package it up to where it's neat and tidy for people to be able to run with it without spending as much time as we are, because they're not going to do it. That's why medication is so beneficial in their lives, because it's, well, here's the pill, go to the pharmacy and you keep doing what you're doing. So I don't even know. I don't even know. Can we from that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think Kerry Mann over at Homestead How, he's working on a documentary about the carnivore diet that'll be streaming. So hopefully that would be a good conversation starter. Like, okay, you have a lot of these people that have obtained good results eating this way that goes against the norm, so to speak. Maybe that plants the seed of questioning in people's minds, because it is kind of an uphill battle, because in order to get to where you or I are, I mean, how many beliefs do you have to go against, right? You got to, go up this idea that, low fat, high carb is the way to go, that salting your food is not bad for you. Getting out in the sunshine is not for you. Just so many things along the way that can trip you up to get to the point where you and I are. So it's like, you got to take. So I mean, that's part of my YouTube. Yeah, part of my YouTube
even getting to the point
is,
where. Sorry, there's a delay there. So like even getting to the point where like your doctor, you've been trusting doctors your entire life to hopefully give you the best information, and you have to come to the realization that they probably haven't been giving you the best advice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just such a mind-altering thing, like,
Well, that's where I think you got to get into this idea of patient empowerment. I mean, a lot of people switch to keto or carnivore or lion, not because they read a study somewhere in PubMed, but because they saw someone's story and it was compelling enough for them to give it a whirl and be curious about it. So I think,
I mean, that's how Dr. Westman got his start. He started seeing his patients doing Atkins in the 90s. And then he kind of went from there. He's like, well, if I'm seeing these results, what else is going on?
Yeah. And so, even doctors, as, professionals and stuff, they've got to, do continuing education, just because, things that they may have learned in school might be outdated by that point. So, hopefully there's more momentum. I'm thinking that, that documentary that Carrie's doing is going to be helpful. I think if there's like a celebrity out there that can show like amazing results on a carnivore or keto way of doing and sustain it, I mean, that would go a long way, just given how prevalent entertainment is in today's society. I thought that like Sharon Osbourne did something like that with the Atkins folks a while back. I don't know what her.
Now she's on Ozempic.
Oh, now she's on Ozempic. So yeah,
even Oprah switched from Weight Watchers to Ozempic, or one of the iterations. I don't know if it's that brand or not, but she's done that. I know Rob Lowe was a Atkins person. He was being paid to do advertisements for Atkins. The same thing with Alyssa Milano. She was paid by Atkins. And I know there's been celebrities out there and even athletes who have been doing the whole like carnivore thing or keto or whatever. Some have tried to go vegan and totally like bonked, and like their performance went way down and they had to reverse course. And Steph said that Halle Berry is doing something, but even still, like there's such a stigma with it that they're not out there necessarily going on The View talking about it, or they do, they're getting, 45 seconds to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird how much it is up to us.
Mm-hmm.
And how much it is such a daunting thing. Like, no matter how much progress we think we're making, I kind of wonder, like, I mean, are we going to actually make a difference? And I'm not trying to be pessimistic at all, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like, my brain's always going on this stuff. That's why, like, even sometimes, like I said, I have to just step away and watch something else because I'm always invested in this community, and it kind of starts to drive me nuts a little bit. So, like, like, I'm always trying to watch a live, even though I'm watching TV, I've got a live going on my phone or something, and it's quietly listening as we're watching something, and I'm like, so yeah. But I want to say thank you so much, Charlie, for being here and talking with me. And I want to go ahead and also thank everybody in our chat that's been here today so very much. There's been always so many wonderful people in the chats. The members that I have, so many awesome members. You're one of my members, Charlie.
Yep.
And I appreciate that so very much. Let me get back to the comments here. So anything that you want to, I know you don't really have social media, you don't really have a channel of your own, but is there anything you want to plug or talk about before we go?
Well, for those in the area, there is a meetup in a few weeks, right? So
yes, and today is the last day to sign up. So check out or check in with Jackie's Keto Journey. I think her email is Jackie's Keto Journey at gmail.com, and let her know if you want to come. Our meetup is March, May the 18th at noon in Amo, Indiana, which is west of Indianapolis, about 35-40 minutes out west of Indianapolis. We're having brisket, we're having pulled pork, and we're having the Keto Chow pumpkin soup, which is phenomenal. You might want to try it. It's so good.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't really have anything to plug. I think I chose my YouTube handle, the Darth Carnivore, because, like I said, when you figure out how many beliefs or traditional beliefs you're giving up to get to the results, you're kind of turned to the dark side of nutrition at that point. So just really embracing it. I think most important thing is view yourself as an N=1 experiment. Does what you're doing work for you? I mean, ultimately that's the measure. Not only to appreciate the results that your way of eating, way of living gets for you, but also enjoy the process of doing so as well, to the point where you feel good, you appreciate what you're doing. Because I think the first time I was doing low carb keto, I focused more on the results than I did the process, so I didn't weight them equally. So kind of pay attention to that. And the nice thing about the keto carnivore space is I feel like everyone's really genuine. I mean, that's what drew me to your channel, Dustin, your genuineness, your authenticity. The fact that not every keto or carnivore journey is straightforward or simple, right? So, I really appreciate, the content creation that you and others do as well, because that helps me stay on plan, so to speak. And it also me ideas to try, later on and stuff, helps me stay and remain curious. So, and as well as, having the mutual support on everyone's journey. So I thank everybody for taking time out of their day this morning, and Dustin, for you having me on your channel.
Well, thank you for being here, and thanks so much again, everybody. We'll see you. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. I'll have my live. Come hang out with me. Until then, see you next time.
Adios.